John 11, 1-16.
Now a man named Lazarus was ill. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay ill, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, "Lord, the one you love is ill." When he heard this, Jesus said, "This illness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it." Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed where he was 2 more days. And then he said to his disciples, "Let us go back to Judea." "But Rabbi," they said, "a short while ago the Jews tried to stone you, and yet you're going back?" Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours of daylight? Anyone who walks in the daytime will not stumble, for they see by this world's light. It is when a person walks at night that they stumble, for they have no light." After he had said this, he went on to tell them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to wake him up." His disciples replied, "Lord, if he sleeps, he will get better." Jesus had been speaking of his death, but his disciples thought he meant natural sleep. So then he told them plainly, altogether. So then he told them plainly, "Lazarus is dead, and for your sake I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him." Then Thomas, also known as Didymus, said to the rest of the disciples, "Let us also go, that we may die with him." The good news of Christ.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
We're on?
We are on.
Hey. Hi, Flo, and hi, everyone. Flo and I are recording a conversation with each other for you at VEV, for anybody that finds us on the internet. And this conversation is going to be shown on our service for the Sunday before Thanksgiving, which is pretty cool. And Flo and I started talking this week because we are sharing John 11 for teaching. I was assigned to teach this week. Flo's assigned to teach next week. And we got together and started chatting about it. And we just love to talk to each other. And we decided that we would do our sermons a little differently, that we would do our sermons this week and next week together. And we have been loving the process, and I hope that it will bless all of you too. And so what we've done is that we started with the passage that I was assigned this week and that we met yesterday, and we spent a while, hour and a half, doing a lectio together on this passage. And then what Flo did was that she went away and she thought about and processed 3. You got 3 questions for me?
Mm-hmm.
3 things that were either most interesting or like the Spirit stirred in her that I said during our lectio that she wanted to hear me say more about. And then I get to turn the tables next week when she is meant to be teaching. But right now we've been teaching each other and letting the Word teach us. And so this is how we're going to do our teaching time today. And I hope it will bless you as much as we've been enjoying ourselves. And even as we were praying before we hit record, we were both really filled with a sense of joy. Like Flo was praying and I was like, yeah, I feel that too. Like this has just been fun. Like it's almost been too much. Like we're like, oh my gosh, this isn't work. Like this isn't the usual thing of like, I have to sit down and fit in. How am I going to do my sermon amongst my kids and all my stuff? And instead we're just like, we're just hanging out for 3 hours, 4 hours this week, but it totally counts because it's sermon prep. So anyway, we've been doing that. So hi, Flo.
Hi, Joanna.
Thanks for doing this with me.
Oh, it is just a pleasure and a gift. What a gift. I'm so glad that you, asked me to do this with you. Our times together have been so just enriching and sweet.
Me too. I think so too. Yeah. So hypothetically, for those people who are watching not as part of our service, what Flo and I are going to be talking about now is the first part of John chapter 11, verses 1 to 16. If you're listening in our VEV service, you will have just heard that read out loud. And so we did that yesterday. And we chatted about it. And so that's where your questions are for me, I guess, from there. Not I guess, I just didn't know how to fill in the blank. I know that that's what you're going to ask me about.
Yes.
So fire away.
All right. So, yes, the first question has to do with limits. And it was kind of like from our first conversation this week, that was sort of the theme that came up and a suggested topic that Gordy had given. And so I was wondering if you could expand more on what you picked up in the passage on the themes of limits and unlimitedness in the passage.
Yeah, well, as we already talked about this week, it was interesting to me that I got assigned this passage, and I know we already talked about the fact that I've spent way more time just in my own life thinking about this next part of the passage that you're going to preach on, where Mary and Martha are like, Jesus, where were you? You didn't show up. And also, I have been talking about this idea with other women friends a lot lately, this idea of limits. I think it's something that's always been, I know it's always been challenging for me as the way I'm wired, Enneagram 2, oldest daughter in the family, like nice Christian woman in ministry. I am from a British family that's very polite, like very big on manners. And so, but I've actually, this topic has come up a couple times lately with other women friends around when is it loving? Like, when is it healthy and loving to set boundaries? And why is it so hard? Like, why does it feel so wrong? And even as I've talked with my therapist, like there's been a couple times in the last 6 months where I've had to set a boundary or I've had to set a limit, and it has not felt good. Like, I have known intellectually that it was right and good to say, this is a loving limit for me to set for myself, but it has not felt good in my body. Like, I have felt like I was doing something wrong. And I have actually been working with somebody with like body somatic therapy. And I was like, why do I feel so scared? Like, if this is supposed to be this great loving thing to do, like, I feel awful. And she was like, because you were taught your whole life that you're being confrontational when you set a limit, that you're being mean when you set a limit, like that you're being unkind. And so it was so interesting to me when you and I went through first and we did this lectio yesterday. I know both you and I were really drawn in that first paragraph to the description of Mary that John gives, where he says, this is the same Mary who poured out perfume on Jesus. Oh, I just realized I was going to set a timer when I was answering your question, so I didn't talk for forever, and I didn't do that. Let me do that now. So it's the same Mary who poured out perfume. And it was like, I know you and I both talked about like, oh, this is like such an extravagant thing. And then also feeling like, if you knew these people had shown you so much love and hospitality and you were Jesus and you felt like you weren't supposed to go to them, like, wouldn't that be awful? Wouldn't you feel like a jerk? Yet this thing of like unlimitedness kept coming up to me in the language of the passage. Like, the message for the sisters was like, the one that you love is Lazarus. And even Jesus' response is like, it's not going to end in death. Like this impossible thing. He's going to be sick, but he's not going to die. And all the language, like Jesus loved Martha. And then even him being like, not even seeming concerned about going back to Judea, or even Thomas is like, let's go and we're going to die. Like we were talking about that. I remember you said how much you love that. Like, yeah, we're just going to die. Like it's all this, yeah, like all this sense of like, well, there was this big love and, you know, he was really bold and they were going back anyway. And yet the peace in all of this is that Jesus didn't go. And that he understood that as a limit that God set. And so that's what Jesus did. And he just set the limit and was like, we're not going to go. Which kind of blows my mind.
Yeah.
So that's to me the push and pull of those ideas, the limit, setting the limits. And his limit had to be a loving limit because God the Father told him to do it.
Yeah. So like firm one way of setting that limit, but then also the unlimitedness is so vast and great on the other end as well. And just the tension of both being there is, yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So that was one thing I noticed, I think maybe for the first time.
I love that. And yes, I do think Thomas's line at the end is the best line in the Bible. Let's just go die with him.
Totally, we'll start calling him Dying Thomas instead of Doubting Thomas.
Yeah. Let's go. Let's do this.
Yeah.
Oh. Okay. Well, let's go on to the next question.
Okay.
That sound good?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So, this really made me think a lot when you were talking about these things that I'm going to mention now.
Okay.
Can you comment more about the feelings you had approaching this passage, just around how Jesus didn't go, and then your thoughts about changing your lens in looking at this passage?
Yeah. Yeah. I think I know I already mentioned a little bit in answering your last question that to me, this story had always stood out to me as Jesus not going when his friends called him. Like that's the big piece that stood out to me. And to the point that like when I have meditated on this, like I wrote like this huge song about this years ago when I was like in a group that was creating stuff about it, like the doubt that Mary had, and in that song I imagined that Jesus wrestled with that, like, oh, you didn't go. And like even into the next passage that you're going to teach on, like I imagined that you know that famous line that's going to come out where it's like Jesus wept, is like because he was so mad that God didn't let him go when his friends asked him to go. But you know, I said beforehand, I was like, I even discovered something else, but I'm not going to tell you about it until we start recording because I'm going to. So, you know, yesterday, it's funny, I'm saying so, you know, yesterday we were reading this through and I said to you, the sentence where Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard Lazarus was ill, he stayed where he was for 2 more days and then said to his disciple, let's go back to Judea. And I always thought that was wrong. Like to the point where I was like, that must have been mistranslated. Like that actually can't have been. Those 2 thoughts don't go together. He loved them so much, so he didn't go and he waited 2 more days. And I said to you, like, I was looking for other translations that said it differently. And like, wanting it to be different. Like even like, you know, the only thing I found was in Peterson's message saying, so strangely he didn't go. And I'm like, yeah, it's strangely. So I went to the Greek this morning because I woke up thinking about this. So I went to Blue Letter Bible, and you know what the word so is in the Greek? So, like that's literally what it is. Like it's therefore. It's like Jesus loved them so much. Therefore, he didn't go. And I was like, oh, damn, like that is, oh, sorry, I swore. Sorry, people that think damn is a swear. Anyway, in my head, I was like, I'm so sorry. But that's how it was. It was like, oh, man, like that is, like John is saying, that was the loving thing to do. He loved them so much. Essentially, he obeyed God. He loved them so much. He listened to what God said and didn't go. And I feel like, oh man, like that. I think that helps me understand more how I've experienced, I don't know, maybe the limits of my own humanity or like walking through harder times. But anyway, that is the lens. That's the lens that's been changed for me, is that I came to this verse thinking, this was messed up. Like this wasn't a loving thing, or this would have been so excruciating because it would have felt. And I think that still could have, it still is definitely the case, because we read next week as the verse goes on, where Mary said, like the first thing that they say when Jesus gets there is, if you were here, my brother wouldn't have died. But Jesus knows all the way along, like, or I don't know, we talked about this yesterday. I don't know if he knows all the way along, but the Father tells him eventually, because originally he says, this isn't going to end in death, but then he says he fell asleep. So I don't know when God gives him the knowledge of the different pieces, but Jesus knows, right? He says, Lazarus is dead. For your sake, I'm glad I wasn't there. So he doesn't say he wasn't glad. He doesn't say he's glad he didn't go, but he's like, for your sake, all of you are going to see this. And so I think for me, it's just expanding my idea of how boundaries or limits are loving, right? Like it's actually loving to say, this isn't okay, or it still doesn't feel okay to me in my body sometimes when I set a limit. Like I still sometimes feel like I'm not being loving because I'm relearning or unlearning or thinking differently about what it means to be nice, right? Or to be loving. Or even how you're interpreted as a woman, like sometimes setting limits as a woman, or even sometimes saying something in 3 words as opposed to taking 27 words to say something as a woman. Like it's always such a relief to me to find women that you can say, no, it's fine. And they go, great. Like, you don't have to say 5 sentences about it. And believe me, I'm the queen of 5 sentences. Like I had, you know, but it's, anyway.
Oh, yes.
The lens has flipped. In you and I processing this together in Lectio, which is what's so crazy about Lectio, right? I came in thinking one thing, and now I actually think, and now I find out the Greek backed me up. Like that's literally what it says. So I just think that's astonishing that this is what this verse says, is that the loving thing to do was not go. Crazy.
Crazy.
Like when Gordy's like, when did they put that in the Bible?
Yeah. Oh, yes. One side comment to what you were saying about like 5 sentences. You should see me like when I need to respond to a text and I'm just like overthinking it so much because,
yes.
Okay, what is this going to sound like to them? And how do I like make this seem like the way I want it to be? What emoji should I put there? So like that it just is exactly what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
That was just
I so relate to that. I actually have said to my close friends, like, don't text me about I can't do confrontation via text. Like even like recently I was talking with a girlfriend and I was like, when you sent me that thing she's like, I wasn't confronting you. I was just telling you a thing. I was like, no, but it was like a correction. And then I spent an hour. And she was like, I was like, an hour. I spent an hour composing the text. Like, I love, do you know the neurodivergent community? My kids have taught me the neurodivergent community are starting to put tone signatures, like joking, not joking, sarcasm for neurodivergent kids that don't get, I'm like, we all need
No,
that.
we all need that. That's great. Yes. Oh, I love that. Just a follow up to the original question.
Yeah.
I really liked what you said yesterday about like him making that decision, even though, and I think you kind of already talked about this, but I thought I would ask
No,
if you
please.
could expand more.
It's supposed to be a conversation. Say, you
Yeah.
go.
That he made the decision knowing that he would wound.
Oh yeah.
That word really stuck out to me. Those that he loved.
Yeah.
Or loves. And then on the other hand, that he did go. It just didn't look the way that they were expecting. I was wondering if you could talk more about that, because I really loved that.
Well, yeah. I mean, just what you said. I mean, I think you said it just right. Like, that was astonishing to me that he did go. Like, he did go. He did show up, right? That's the part of the story that you're going to talk about next week. He did go. And he did heal Lazarus. And he did do everything that they wanted him to do, but just not in the timing that they were hoping for. And I imagine it would have been soul destroying. Like, they were so sure he'd be there and he didn't come. And even what I remember learning about this is like, they believed that the soul had left the body after, is it like 2 days or 3 days? I'm not sure, but I remember somebody talking about this miracle and saying that it's significant that it was like, he's 4 days in the grave. Like, part of that comment is like, he's dead, like he's super dead. Like, the soul is, I don't know what super dead is, but you know what I mean? Like, the soul is nowhere there. But then the whole point, like, I don't want to preach your sermon from next week, but the whole point of the miracle of that resurrection is there was no way, like, all the hope was gone. And the incredibleness of that miracle that comes is there was no hope. But that process of saying, yes, Father, I am going to forgive you. Well, it's like you and I were talking before we started recording about how brutal it is to sit with our children in their pain, knowing that our job is actually not to take away their pain, is just to be present in their pain, right? And so Jesus making that choice to not go, set that limit, follow the Father, trusting that it would be better, like trusting that God's way would be better. And in the end, all the things that the sisters want to happen, but not in their timing, not the way they wanted it. And so much of my pain, I think, is that way, right? Like, God does this extraordinary thing, but it's, if we can survive the waiting, right? If we can survive the disappointment, like surviving the devastation of our hopes of God not showing up in the way that we think he's supposed to show up, a lot of times means that we just think he's not there. I just had a thought. Okay, you know how you and I were like, it's so hard to sit and listen to your kids, and you just have to sit there in faith that they're going to figure it out. God totally must do that with us. Do we think like he must be like, okay, this is the best thing for them, and I know my kid is going to be devastated, and I'm going to have to sit and watch them go through this, and he's just going to have to hope, right? Like, he's got to have faith in us.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Yes. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Even when we're like sitting in excruciating pain,
Yeah.
he is also in excruciating pain, just watching us, and knowing everything's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I guess having to have faith in us, right?
Mm.
Like, having to have trust in, I mean,
Yeah,
that's when you get into the really deep questions of like, how much does he know? Because if we still have free will, he has to still give us this choice.
Yeah.
Too much for this short sermon.
Yeah. It's like what we were saying though, like, we trust we're have to ask that our kids are going to get through it.
Yeah.
Set the
Yeah,
time.
and there's a degree that I've realized I have to trust in my kids too. Like, even if I don't trust, like when they're dealing with stuff with friends, like I don't know how their friends are going to respond.
Yeah.
Right? But trusting in God, but then also trusting in your kids.
Yeah.
I mean, we also have great kids too, so
Totally.
Yeah.
Oh. Well,
I've completely lost my time. I started answering and then I stopped and started my timer. I don't know where we are for time.
okay.
We'll do the third question and then we'll just pray that it's fine for timing. Sorry, everybody. No idea. Hope you're enjoying this.
Oh, well, actually, I feel like the conversation has like flowed right into our third question.
Perfect.
Which is about God and our pain. So I just feel like we're right on track wherever the time is.
I love that.
So given what we were just talking about, can you share more about how God's love is not without pain, but he shows us solidarity in our pain?
Yeah. Okay. So that was that quote. I actually did look it up because Flo gave me a heads up on. She was like, "I'm going to think on these are the points if you want to think more about it." And I actually went back and looked this up because when I was talking to you yesterday, I was like, I read this quote and it was like something like this, but it made me think. Anyway, yesterday I was on Instagram and I followed the Henry Nouwen Society on Instagram, and I was really stopped by this quote. And I thought it made me think of when we were walking through the passage. So it was this: the mystery of God's love is not that our pain is taken away, but that God first wants to share that pain with us. Out of this divine solidarity comes new life. And the quote was longer in the comments, but it was saying, Jesus being moved in the center of his being by human pain is indeed a movement toward new life. God is our God, the God of the living. In the divine womb of God, life is always born again. The truly good news is that God is not a distant God, a God to be feared and avoided, a God of revenge, but a God who's moved by our pain and participates in the fullness of the human struggle. But I just thought that, anyway, I was said to Faith, sorry, you're not Faith. I said to Flo yesterday, like, yeah, I was seeing, it makes me think about this quote that I read about God doesn't want to just deliver us. He wants to come in with us and be with us in our pain. And this idea of solidarity. And when I read that longer quote, I feel like that's this story, is that it's not that God just takes it away and makes it go. It's that God first wants to come and share the pain with us. And out of the divine solidarity comes new life. Jesus being moved in the center of his being by human pain is a movement towards new life. And I think that's this story. Like, and that is even maybe made more real by this devastating thing of him not showing up. But then when he does show up, he totally enters in to the pain of what's happening in that moment. And so I think I believe this more the more difficult things I go through. And it's interesting because you and I were even talking yesterday how personally, like, it's shaped my life and it shaped my walk with God in that I don't even necessarily want to have quiet times in the same way that I used to before, or not even all worship music sounds the same to me before. Like, there's still pain there where I feel like, I don't know if I can as simplistically enter into like, everything is great all the time. But I do feel like I feel like it was God's mercy that I had a breakdown. Like, I feel now like that was a gift from God. But in the midst of that, it was excruciating. And excruciating for my family, excruciating for my children. But did I need to learn about limits? Oh my gosh, yes. Like Wade used to say to me when I was pastoring, you can't make everybody happy. And I would say genuinely, but I can. Like I'm actually pretty good at it most of the time. Because I was like, well, that's my gift. I'm good at making people happy. So anyway, I don't know how much wiser I can be with Henry now and about that, other than saying the longer I journey with God and the more I go through difficult times, the more I believe this to be true. And so I don't think it's because of a lack of love that God allows us to go through pain. I do think there is something extraordinary about him sharing in our suffering. And I don't even really know what it means, this idea of sharing in the sufferings of Christ. Like, I feel like I haven't even touched the surface of that, but people way smarter than me have talked about that. So there's something about that. And there's something about that with each other too. Like you can sit and have chit chat with people for years, but then when there's an opportunity to share in each other's pain, it's like nothing else. So anyway, that was why I was talking about that yesterday, because that quote had resonated with me and it made me think about the beauty of I guess how even though none of this looks beautiful at first for Mary and Martha, they just seem devastated. In the end, God does do what they asked, but in this totally different way that they're probably going to have to work out.
Yes.
But they'll probably work it out with Jesus. So, yeah.
Yes. I feel like that's like the perfect spot to end for the to be continued of next week.
Find out how they work it out with Jesus next week on Conversations with Joe and Flo. That'll be great. So I feel like I don't even want to give like one question. I feel like for breakouts, I would just encourage you to have a conversation about any of those things. So maybe we'll get organized to actually type something up. But I think those pieces around limits. What did you ask me? Limits and unlimitedness and sharing pain, and what was the second one?
Changing your lens, or that he didn't go. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, maybe we'll get more organized and actually type out some questions for you. But for now, thanks everybody.
Thanks everyone.